In this exciting episode, it's snowing in Los Angeles, and I'm not talking about the weather. It's Season 1, Episode 29 of Perry Mason, The Case of the Hesitant Hostess. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy, and my purpose here is pretty simple. Provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do a pod for every episode of the television series, and as time permits, I'll look at some of those made-for-TV movies too. I'll be working through the series in the order in which the episodes were aired. Each episode, I'll give a brief refresher on the plot, and if the episode was based on a novel, I'll compare the book with its television adaptation. Next, I'll list some key pieces of trivia as well as tackle the episode's main theme. We'll feature a Perry proverb, a moment of wisdom from the man himself, and then we'll finish with a post-case water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can rehash the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the Law Library! Each week in the Law Library, we return to prior episodes to refresh our memories about Perry's past so we can find fresh precedents for future cases. Prompted by a question from faithful listener Marge, this episode in the Law Library, we turn our attention to blackmail. A fun little legal nuance here. You can find characters talking about extortion in Perry Mason as a kind of synonym for blackmail. I wondered what exactly the distinction was. General extortion is like racketeering, someone getting money from you upon threat of violence. Blackmail is a specific kind of extortion where the blackmailer extorts money by promising not to reveal damning information. Our murder victim in the case of the hesitant hostess was getting her own blackmail on, and it cost her her life. And we see blackmail several times in Season 1 of Perry Mason. There's the case of the drowning duck.
All I want to do is enhance my own happiness. Say, $5,000 worth within 48 hours. I'm at the Sands Motel.
You contemptible blackmailer.
The case of the vagabond vixen.
You must admit that a person who's out for blackmail wouldn't be interested in a job.
Wouldn't she?
The case of the negligent nymph.
I always thought your Aunt Agatha's death was a little too convenient.
This is an obvious forgery.
Is it? Is that why you paid off Dorian's blackmail?
The case of the baited hook.
What do you want?
Where's the file Tidings was using for blackmail?
The case of the fan dancer's horse.
I'm not asking you to handle a divorce case. This is blackmail.
The case of the cautious coquette.
I'm not joking. I need your help. I'm being blackmailed.
The case of the green-eyed sister.
He makes a show of trying to beat down the blackmailer's price, acts for the victim, delivers the payoff, and charges the client a nominal fee.
The case of the one-eyed witness.
How do you think we got into this mess in the first place, huh? Because my sister didn't know that you can't do business with blackmailers.
And there's probably implicit blackmail going on in another couple of cases too. If you think of one I've missed, please let me know. In the show, blackmail comes from two sources. Either a close acquaintance who knows the dope. Think here of Mrs. Fargo's husband in the case of the one-eyed witness, or Mr. Calendar in the case of the fan dancer's horse, or Harvey Pitkin in the case of the cautious coquette. Or you have a third party who has somehow obtained an inside scoop. And this basically applies to every single detective in the show, a private detective who's not Paul Drake. I've always been struck by the lack of any collective memory surrounding Perry's cases, either by Perry himself or the district attorney, you would think that at this point, 28 consecutive losses in the courtroom would take the pride out of Hamilton Berger, or that all Perry would have to say at a given point is, district attorney, please recall the case of the demure defendant, and that would be the end of it. So in some ways, there's no memory from show to show of each individual case, and yet blackmail is about remembering the past. The prevalence of blackmail in this series means that these characters can't escape what they've done, and it is ominous indeed. Now, without further ado, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Hesitant Hostess. Our story opens with the burgeoning LA nightlife scene, the lives of young, rich, attractive people juxtaposed with down-and-out Albert Saunders, surely one of the most forlorn defendants in the entire first season.
I'm warning you, Sanders. I catch you hanging around here again, I'll call the cops.
We see enough to know that shady business is going down at the generically titled Danceland Ballroom. Of course, there's the requisite marital infidelity.
I want you to know one thing, Kim. I'm not going to go on being...
You'll go on being anything I want you to be, Mr. Frederick Archer III. Let's get that straight.
There's nothing more between us.
Nothing but money.
But it also appears there's mysterious operations that the ballroom as a front for.
You know, if it wasn't for those trips, I'd quit tomorrow.
Too late to quit, baby. You're as much a part of the operation as the bricks in this building.
What do you mean, operation?
When you find that out, you'll have just invented security.
And soon there's the requisite murder when the body of former hostess Kim Lane, the one who thought she could blackmail the Danceland Ballroom and its proprietors, winds up dead. Albert Saunders has no personal connection with Kim Lane or anyone at the ballroom. His murder charge is just another unfortunate personal trial in a life that's been full of them.
I know a good deal about you. I know that 8 years ago your wife and 2 children were killed in an automobile accident.
It was all my fault. If I hadn't fell asleep at the wheel,
Because you'd been driving 36 hours straight to get here in time for a job.
Perry picks up Saunders' case pro bono, the first time we've seen Perry get a court appointment to defend someone. Of course, Perry has stumbled on a case that's larger than some misbehaving nightclub execs. First, Archer et al. Make key witness Inez Kaler disappear, and Kaler was ready to indict Martha Rayburn for lying about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Then Inez goes missing.
Perry, she wanted to put Martha Rayburn on the griddle. I had no idea she'd fade like that.
I'll have to find her, Paul, by Monday morning.
I'll find her.
Next thing we know, Inez is pretending to take too many sleeping pills and escaping out the back of her apartment.
Honey, you should have used a gun. They just haven't figured out a way to remove a bullet with a stomach pump. Come on, Inez, open up. Inez!
Then Perry uses some dubious legal reasoning to get inside Inez and Kim's Las Vegas apartment, where he and Della are confronted by a gum-chewing, gun-toting hood named Joseph Gibbs, who takes a postcard and begins to give the game away.
Let's call the police, shall we?
You're probably bluffing, but I can't take the chance. Face the door over there. Hurry up, I haven't much time.
Perry enlists Della to find out about our gum-smacking friend by asking her to pose as a potential model. More male leering ensues before Della says the wrong thing.
Drop the coat. Yeah, you look all right. Are you alone in town?
Yes. Except for my husband, that is.
Your husband? Lady, did you read the ad? It said unattached models.
Well, I'm terribly sorry to have bothered you, Miss.
Back in court, Perry finds the weak link in Martha Rayburn's testimony, her handbag.
Will you describe the inside of that handbag for the court, please?
Well, it's roomy and well made, and it has a separate compartment for everything.
What about the mirror?
Oh, yes, there's a mirror attached to the outside flap.
And behind the mirror?
Well, I don't know what you mean.
There's a small set screw. I took the liberty of loosening it. Would you remove the mirror, please? Thank you. There seems to be traces of some kind of powder here. Would you know what that is?
I have no idea.
It doesn't smell, so I don't suppose it would be face powder. But it does have a taste, Miss Rayburn. A taste of heroin.
Sanders gives one of the series' greatest smiles when he hears the judge announce him innocent.
Kim Lane could only have told you that in one place. In Fred Archer's apartment. In Fred Archer's apartment where you killed her. Killed her for $5,000.
I demand to see a lawyer.
That's all, Your Honor.
The district attorney is ordered to take the necessary steps against the parties involved. And the defendant is ordered released from custody.
Perry doesn't just win court cases. He changes lives. Also, Paul ends up taking Miss Kaler out on a date, and Perry is pretty cynical about his own private investigator's rep.
Mm-hmm. Paul was a track coach. They figured any girl he couldn't catch in 3 laps around the desk was ready for the business world.
Fantastic! Paul is a sexually harassing boss who literally chases women around the room. Hasn't Paul's time working for Perry taught him anything about misplaced romantic ardor? Lust kills, Paul! Stop it! Now, let's discuss the 1953 novel that the episode was based on. Yep, there are some differences. Number 1. The novel opens with Perry already defending Albert Saunders, pro bono just like in the show, for robbery, and we never actually get to a murder trial because Mason solves the case in the course of the robbery investigation. Number 2, Gardner plays Albert's story a little bit differently than the television adaptation. In the novel, Saunders is the victim of a car accident that sends him into a downward spiral. He has a niece from the Midwest who appears in LA to help him out. And when it's all over, Mason is pretty sure he can sue Archer and Rayburn for character aspersion and get poor Albert some much needed cash. No music shop for this guy. Number 3, there are 2 Inez Kaler types in the novel, including one who kisses Perry and makes a pass at him when Perry goes to the ballroom himself to investigate. This is the first time I've read in any of the novels where Perry kisses someone other than Della. Number 4, we never actually meet the young woman who gets killed trying to blackmail the drug pushers. And number 5, as far as I can tell, the Joseph Gibbs character in the novel does not chew gum. That's some mighty fine TV adaptation writing, folks. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. A Della is something about a particular character in the story. And a Perry is something we learn about our main character. Our Paul this week concerns heroin smuggling. Perry seems pretty definitive about the drug trade being a scourge on society.
The traffic in narcotics has enraged every decent-thinking man and woman in this country.
This week's research prompt. What were the laws concerning heroin in 1950s California and the U.S. in general? What was the drug trade like? Where were people smuggling it in from? And what other nicknames besides Snow did heroin have in the culture?
They'd get a load of snow and then bring it back in.
Snow?
Heroin.
Our Della this week concerns the dashing Ralph Faulkner, played by Gil Fry. We last saw Gil Fry.
Hiya, Faulkner.
Mr. Drake, this is Inez Kaler.
In The Case of the Fugitive Nurse, where he was also portraying a Paul Drake detective not named Faulkner, but named Marshall.
It's a good luck medallion. You know, a zodiac sign. See, that's Leo. I'm a Scorpio myself.
It's not surprising. Fry showed up in 10 different episodes of the show across its 9 seasons as a variety of characters, including one other episode as Faulkner. Now, don't confuse Ralph Faulkner with Frank Faulkner, another oft-used Drake operative played by Bob Bice. You may remember Frank Faulkner from The Case of the Nervous Accomplice or The Case of the Fan Dancer's Horse.
I told Perry you had an urgent message for him, Frank.
Mr. Mason, I don't want you to think with my appearance in court today and being a witness for the prosecution that I'd sold you out.
I appreciate your position, Faulkner.
It's unclear which of these Faulkners Drake is referring to in The Case of the Desperate Daughter.
How in the world did your men ever spot the car from up there?
Faulkner's half bird dog on his father's side.
In any case, better know your Faulkner. Our Perry this episode concerns the fact that Perry knows heroin simply by its smell and taste. As to how Perry knows the taste and smell of heroin, well, we're left in the dark. Perry does indeed contain multitudes. Our theme for this episode is redemption. At first, I wondered why Saunders maintained his stubble throughout the trial. Couldn't Perry get the man a good shave for court? And then I thought this might have to do with Saunders' despondency, that this man who has been beaten down by life may have been put on watch by prison guards so that officials are afraid to give him a razor. Sanders has no family. His lawyer is court-appointed. With a mere $23 to his name and a beat-down old trailer, Saunders finds himself in the dirt.
Always in the gutter. Why?
Even worse, he sees the justice system as the very thing that's put him in this position.
I'm full and running over with justice, and I'm getting rid of you, this trial, and this jail.
Now, in earlier episodes, we've seen Perry help save marriages, a man's business, and even a man from jail. Remember the father of the defendant in the case of the Sunbather's Diary. But this is the first case where it seems like Perry has not just presented the disaster of a mistaken conviction, but helped provide a positive and redemptive trajectory for a man who was previously hopeless. Way to go, Perry. Now it's time for a Perry proverb. Before the court finds you innocent, you have to forgive yourself. Perry gets to the heart of Albert Saunders' depression in this episode's Perry proverb.
You can't keep on blaming yourself for an accident.
Yeah, you just have to worry that the DA and police will start making mistakes you can't recover from. Admittedly, it's probably going to be harder for Saunders to get over his family than it will for Perry to get him off. The internal jury of the conscience, always more fierce than the external jury of one's peers. Not that Perry would ever let a case get to the jury in the first place. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand. Go on, Paul.
Thanks to everyone who responded to the previous episode. Our Paul research prompt from the case of the daring decoy involved 1958 Ellendale, California houses and the mortgage rates appertaining thereto. First things first, there's no Ellendale, California. That's right. If you look up the address on Fred Calvert's letter from the episode, you get bupkis. Now, in the novel, The town Mr. Calvert lives in is Elsinore, California. Elsinore, also not a town, but Lake Elsinore, California certainly is. It's a little bit further inland than L.A. It's also south. In the show, it appears that Ellendale is about 47 miles from L.A. Lake Elsinore is about 70 miles from L.A. My Aunt Myra contributed some key data to our research this week. Namely, she found out that the median California home circa 1960 cost $12,744. That's around $75,000 in today's cash. Today, the median home in Lake Elsinore costs you a cool $366,000. And I also tracked down a group called the International Association for Identification, a kind of forensics group that does indeed give certifications regarding the ability to identify shoe wear. Maybe it's not Stanford, but you budding Mavis Jordans out there now have a think tank that can back you up. As always, I'd love feedback about this particular episode or the podcast in general. Was there something about this week's pod you'd like to comment on? Something that you'd like to correct? You can leave comments on the pod's website at theperrypod.libsyn.com or email me at theperrypod@gmail.com. You'll find those links in the show notes. All Perry Pod episodes are available via Spotify and YouTube as well as iTunes. Thanks again for joining me on this pod journey. Next time, Della gets grilled on the stand and Perry's got a defender. It's the case of the screaming woman. Join me, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat.